Hello and welcome to this episode of Whitecloth Geography. In today's video we will be looking in more detail into the resource management overview topic. This is a topic found in paper 2 of your GCSE. Today we will be looking at the section 1B, Global Inequalities of Supply, Demand and Consumption of Food, Water and Energy. Some of the key themes we will cover today are distribution of resources, types of energy, impacts of development upon these resources. Across the world, there are many key resources countries need to survive and develop. None of these will come as a shock or a surprise to you, as these are resources you will use in your everyday life. These key resources are food, to eat and fuel our bodies and allow us to live an active and healthy lifestyle. Water. Water is not only needed, but this supply also needs to be clean and safe. However, this is not always the case in every country. As you will already know, we need a supply of water to drink, run homes, keep clean and grow crops. And finally, energy is a resource also needed in everyday life and becomes increasing in demand as a country develops. A HIC will demand and consume more energy than both an NEE and an LIC. Although an NEE will have the rapid increase in its demand as it begins to develop. Energy is needed by both individuals and industry-wide. Even though all of these resources are needed in every country, this does not mean they are evenly distributed around the globe. Often people argue this can be influenced by the development or the wealth of a country. As the previous slide showed you, not all resources are evenly distributed, and it can feel like a constant uphill battle for some countries to access resources. Some countries do not have their own reserves of energy, so therefore have to rely on other countries. Other countries have physical barriers such as landscapes or climate which prevent them from growing crops. This uneven distribution often causes countries to then import or find technological fixes to replace these resources. However, this can be very expensive, and many poorer, less wealthy countries cannot afford to do this. As previous slides have stated, distribution of resources is uneven. However, so is the consumption of these resources. As you may possibly expect, the consumption of resources is directly linked to the wealth of a country and the availability of these resources. For example, HIC countries have a higher consumption of resources as the quality of life there demands it. The population of these countries expect to regularly access a variety of foods, clean water and energy sources needed to run their homes, for example. Also, these HICs, if resources are not available to them, they do have increased wealth, which means they can have the ability to import any missing resources. NEE countries such as Brazil have rapid growing demand and consumption of resources in order to support their recent development. This in particular can be an increased demand and consumption of energy to support such things as the growth in the manufacturing industry, for example the JLR factory in Rio. As you may have predicted, an LIC country will have a lower demand and consumption of resources. This is often linked to the accessibility to resources and the lack of wealth to imported resources, so they are unable to import any gaps in the resources they may have. The world map on the side shows variation in consumption of energy around the world. Using the key, you are able to identify areas of high or low consumption of this energy. At this point, you may wish to pause the video and have a look at some examples you may have studied in previous case studies, for example Brazil. Some examples I have picked out: HICs such as Canada consume between 250 and 400 million of British thermal units per person annually. This is vastly increased from our example of an NEE such as Brazil, who only consume between 25 and 74 per person. Finally, LICs such as Sudan consume even less, only consuming between 5 and 9. You may now think what can cause these inequalities in energy, especially if everyone was to develop at the same time. Inequalities of energy can come from countries having a lack of their own fossil fuel reserves. This can include energy sources such as coal, gas and oil. Lack of energy access can also come from lack of capital to invest in renewable energy such as solar and wind. Many people do not have the income to support this technological advancement. This may also come when they run out of their own reserves of fossil fuels and cannot invest in a new sustainable clean energy. This can often lead to imported energy needed by countries, which can often only be afforded in a HIC country. The map on this next slide shows variations in access and consumption of food. However, the map shows percentage of population that are undernourished, indicating that this percentage of the population do not have regular access to food or consumption of food. HICs such as Australia have very low undernourishment levels due to good access and consumption of food. However, NEs such as India have moderately high undernourishment levels, indicating that these countries have less access to food on a regular basis. So again, what can cause these inequalities in food? Physical landscape make it hard to grow food, meaning some areas with a mountainous area may struggle to grow crops as the land is not suitable. Climate of an area. So is it too hot or is it too cold? Does this restrain when crops can be grown? Can they only be grown at certain times of the year, or is it all year round that they struggle for rainfall or precipitation? A country cannot afford to import food. So if they rely on imports from abroad, they need to be able to afford that purchasing power. They may not have access to this, so have to only consume what they can grow in their country. Countries may also use the land to grow food to export for income. So for example, they may use the land to make money for the crops they can grow and sell to countries around the globe, but this may mean they do not have enough food for their own population. The map on the slide shows the water scarcity. This is when there is not enough water for the population. However, it must also be a clean and safe supply of water to service the population's needs. Again, at this point you may wish to pause and see if any of your case study countries have good or low water scarcity or struggle with their water scarcity levels. Water supply for the population, as I've said, needs to be clean and safe, or otherwise it does not meet its purpose. Continents such as Europe has the lowest levels of water scarcity, meaning they have good access for their populations to consume water. However, some HICs can afford to import clean water in order to reduce their water scarcity levels. However, LIC countries would not have the same advantage as option as this. So, to summarise today's slide and today's video, we have covered section 1b, looking at our global inequalities for supply, demand and consumption of food, water and energy. The key themes we have covered is the distribution of resources and why this is uneven across the world. We have looked at what can influence this distribution and cause this unevenness. Development can influence the consumption of resources and how this can give purchasing power to replace any gaps in resources that may be found. Economic wealth can also impact the consumption and access to resources, may open new doors to bring in resources, or it may increase that demand as the quality of life demands this. Development can also be slowed by a lack of access to this consumption, so if they do not have the resources to support their population, will this support the economic growth they have? So I'll leave you on this summary slide with some things to think about. So thank you for watching this White Glove Geography video on global inequalities, supply, demand and consumption of resources, food, water and energy. Bye!